right, so I wanted to make this video first an introduction before we start going into the movements. I wanted to teach you something called controlled articular rotations, or CARs. And essentially it is a way to make sure that you move every joint through full range of motion. And it's something you should do every day, if not several times a day. Learning it initially, it'll take a little more time. And then as you become familiar with it, you can easily go through it in 10 minutes. And especially as we all will be a little bit more homebound, I'm hoping that we all have some time to spend on self-care. I think it's going to be really, really important during this time. So with CARs, there's just a couple of things that are very important. Okay, so CARs should be first pain-free. I'm going to explain in just a minute why it's so important to be pain-free, but really just for your nervous system. I know I've talked to a lot of people about bullying the nervous system doesn't usually give you anything positive. So always be pain-free. And with each joint, I will go through how to avoid it. But if you picture a Pac-Man, if we all remember Pac-Man, but that little like circle that has a little cutout. So if I was moving, let's say my neck, and I felt some pain, I would just back out, kind of go around it, and then continue my circle. So just cut out a bite of where there is pain, but I really don't want you pushing through pain. Number 2 is no closing angle sensation. Now, I didn't say pain there, I just said sensation, because essentially, like with my shoulder, if I am coming up, you can see this angle is opening, this angle is closing. And so as you're moving into a range, you might be moving into ranges that you haven't really experienced in a long time, because you may not in your day-to-day life have a need to move like that. So if you're coming up, you may have sensations here. You may feel a stretch, you may feel a really strong stretch. I'm okay with that. Just explore it. Make sure your nervous system isn't sending you warning, anything like that. But this opening angle sensation is what we expect to find. If you're coming up and you're finding a closing angle sensation, whether it's in your neck, your shoulder, any place where that angle is getting smaller, I want you to make sure to make a big kind of detour around that. Closing angle pain is an indication of joint capsule, basically aberrant joint function. And I have ways that I can teach you exercises to try to improve joint function so you're not having pinching there. But I can guarantee you, forcing that is not going to help. A lot of times people get like front of hip pain with squats or different things like that going into full hip flexion. That's another example of closing angle joint pain. So just at this time, as you're going through these videos, don't move into that. Cut a detour around that. And then the last piece is I want you to make the biggest circle you can without taking movement from someplace else. So like if I'm moving my shoulder, I can move it back here and I can make it look like I have a humongous amount of range. But truly, once I get here, that motion's coming from my torso. Or a big one is shoulder flexion, that we get up to here and we actually end what we have in our glenohumeral joint, but then we move through our spine and make it look like we have a lot more. I'd much rather have, and you'll get far more benefit if you keep the circle small and keep it truly to the joint you are focusing on. And just to give you an idea of why these joint circles are so important and why we want to avoid pain and why I recommend probably every single person I'm working with to do them, is that in the joint you have 3 different mechanoreceptors that communicate to your nervous system and to your brain. Essentially, 3 are about movement, about where you are in space, and 1 type is about pain. Unfortunately, pain is the biggest restrictor to movement. We have pain, we move less, we get more pain mechanoreceptors produced, so we move less, and all your brain gets about a joint is pain. So starting to create movement, even like if it's your shoulder, even a small movement like that, you are starting to stimulate the mechanoreceptors that are telling about movement, rather than always just going to the mechanoreceptors about pain. They have found that if they do look at arthritic joints, painful joints, that the pain mechanoreceptors have multiplied and the movement mechanoreceptors have decreased. So all of a sudden, again, you're getting more and more input. We're almost just thinking about the joint. You get a pain signal versus any other much more helpful signals. So just starting to do some small movements, pain-free movements. We're trying to work on starting to move the scale towards more information about movement coming to your brain versus all it being about pain. I could go into that for a long time, but that is not the purpose of this. If you have questions about that, again, I am more than happy to chat with you and tell you a little bit more about the research and a little bit more about the whys behind doing this. But now I want to get to the actual movements. And my plan is to film a video for each joint, so you don't have to sit through a really long video. You can kind of work video by video, repeat one if you feel like you need more practice with it. And then I may, maybe not today, but as we go on, film myself doing my entire morning routine. So you can have kind of a follow along for the entire body. I think that's worthwhile. All right, getting to the next videos. Additionally, when you are doing the CARs, something that is helpful for having your focus stay just on the joint you're moving is something called irradiation. So essentially it's creating tension throughout the body. So the joint that you're trying to move through is the only one that's working. So I'll cue you in some of the videos to tighten your legs, to squeeze your glutes, to create a brace in your abdomen. So to think of ribs to pelvis. So almost if someone was coming after you to tickle you, you would create a little brace in your abdomen, creating that. Sometimes it'll be one arm's moving and so the other arm can squeeze a fist and hold some tension. It's not the greatest isometric contraction you've ever done. It's not a Valsalva maneuver, but it's just some tension so you can really focus on the movement at the joint. So that's one thing that can be very helpful with CARs. The second thing is to really kind of choose a speed and move slowly through the motion. So not going fast, slow, fast, slow. Really try to choose one speed. And if you're having difficulty in an area, your inclination will be to speed up. I want you to do the reverse. If you're having difficulty in an area, explore it. Is there pain that your body's trying to rush past? Is there a history of injury that your body doesn't like exploring that area? Again, just slow down. Don't bully the nervous system, but you can still be curious about it and explore that area. The other thing is sometimes when I'm doing that, if I picture that the air just got a little bit thicker, I find I get a little better movement because I'm picturing that I'm working my way through that air rather than just kind of flailing my arm, if that makes sense. Yeah,